And I'm pretty sure you're going to be sick of recapping on this subject by now, but if you can stand to go over it all one more time, just please bring the listeners up to speed on what the smiley face killings are.
Well, it got its name because the two original investigators from different parts of the US, it was Gannon in New York City, Manhattan, he was a cop, and then Gilbertson, who is a criminal procedure professor in, I think, Wisconsin, both noticed this trend or this phenomenon of young men disappearing at night, later to be found in water. And when these bodies were found, there was a correlation between finding those bodies and this smiley face. So that's how this name kind of stuck. And it has stuck to this phenomenon for either better or worse. But it really is the phenomenon of younger men out at a bar, maybe acting strangely, disappearing, later to be found sometimes very like 40 days later, 3 weeks later, later in water. And it's got its name, and it's just kind of it was, people thought it was regional at the time in major cities, Manchester, Bristol, in the north, kind of east of the United States, but that's not the case. It's really spread out. There's been recent cases in Vancouver.
Hmm. So the first one was 98, was it?
Correct. And his name is Patrick McNeil. I call him Victim Zero, but it really, that's the odd time of when this kind of phenomenon got started, was the late 90s. And he was a student at Fordham University. That's kind of in the north part of New York City. He was at a bar in Manhattan, started acting strange, got sick. People said there was a car following him. He disappeared, but was found downriver in the Hudson in a water treatment facility. And it's really kind of one of the first cases. That's kind of what Gannon saw, was this Patrick McNeil, and then kind of took off from there. There were actually other cases after McNeil. There was another guy that was found in that same water treatment plant, which was really incredible. His name was Andrews, I believe. So, doubt about it.
Hmm. When did the British counterpart aspect first become apparent?
Well, I think that people were noticing it, and then this phenomenon gets different names in different parts of the world. So, in, for example, the Austin water deaths, they're called the Rainy Street Ripper. That's kind of like the main party street in Austin, or the Lady Bird Killer. That's the lake these bodies are found in. Same thing happened in Manchester. They call in Manchester the Pusher. So they started noticing, surmise that there's parties of two or three, and even Gilbertson and Gannon have said that they think that there are independent groups that do this stuff. And so yeah, so it's definitely not a lone serial killer. There's teams and groups who, for some reason, are committing this type of crime. There's no doubt about it, all over the world.
Right. So is it elsewhere besides America and Britain as well?
Yeah, I have cases in France. There's been
So it seems like there's some sort of secret society network that's carrying these things out across these different nations, and they operate in the same way as some of these occult mystery schools operate. So there's a shared ritualistic aspect to it that's just being carried out in all these localized versions of this group.
It seems like it. It seems like that there's some darker purpose and some kind of secret society that holds these people together. The really interesting case that came to my attention was this death of a very famous kind of B level football player here in the United States. His name was Colin Finnerty, and he disappeared in Michigan.
So the police claiming that there's no connection is consistent with the idea of this being a secret society agenda, because maybe the police are controlled by the same kind of groups that might be carrying these things out.
No doubt there could be police or law enforcement involvement. I don't know. I don't have proof of that, but there's been like some very questionable decisions, and questionable prosecutors are put in these positions. I hear all of the prosecutors in the major cities in the United States are political figures who are undermining the rule of law, which is very strange because you're supposed to enforce the law. But maybe there's some darker issues here. Like they had a guy here in, I forgot his name, in LA, but he had like a couple young black men murdered or dead, in his apartment, and they wouldn't prosecute him. It was very strange. And so maybe something like this is going on. Like they just are not willing to really look into what's going on, that they're pre-selected. And one of the interesting things out of the whole death pool of all these people is they're almost all middle class or middle to lower class. Like they never get somebody who's very wealthy or politically or culturally connected, which is really strange. So you, if one, there's something I noticed amongst all of the families of these dead. I mean, I've seen so much wreckage. It's just a disaster. Like I'm over 300 cases at this point, right? But the families all are middle class. It's like they don't have the same resources as somebody who's rich who has an attorney at their call, beck and call, or something like that. So it's a very, it's one aspect of the phenomenon that's very eerie.
Hmm. So, the aspect of this whole thing that interests me the most, and the reason why I feel this is so topical right now, comes down to the naming of the whole phenomenon, the smiley faces and smiley yellow faces in most cases.
Right.
So, I feel that the iconography of this is very relevant. So, what's been happening is where these bodies have shown up in water after some period of time, there's been a smiley face daubed in graffiti onto rocks or tree trunks or whatever, right? Um,
Right.
but in terms of the smiley yellow faces, they've sort of made an appearance in popular culture from time to time through the years. But I've noticed, and many friends that I've spoken to have noticed, that this has really been stepped up in the last maybe 6 months or so. We're seeing smiley yellow faces everywhere. And I
Yes.
think this is relevant. I personally feel that it's connected. So, an obvious one is the smiley emoji that people use on their mobile phones, the smiley yellow face there. But I'm also seeing this motif crop up on bags, clothing, it's in music videos. It has been literally everywhere if you're paying attention over the past few months or so. So it's getting stepped up for a reason, I feel. It's ritualistic, it's symbolic, and it means something. I just don't know what. I wonder how you feel about that aspect of all of this, the smiley face itself, and what it could mean.
Right. Well, that's really how I got interested in this whole phenomenon. I did not come at it from kind of the true crime element. I was studying Crowley and Alan Moore and Fight Club and things like that for occult Hollywood, and the smiley face is all over these two films, right? So, what is the comedian? What? Why does he have this smiley face? Why is it used by Alan Moore?
Right?
And like you probably know, like it's used in acid house music, goes all the way back to the
Absolutely.
70s or 80s.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like, oh, and that's what made me remember this phenomenon. I said, is there a cultural connection between the use of this smiley face symbol and these deaths? And I do think that there is. There's something there. And I think that that's kind of like a cultural connection. Like it's something that these people who are in kind of the secret societies or something like that use. And I've seen it used by the Order of Nine Angles, which I've done a book about. So there's like a connection between that and other kind of very fringe pagan groups in the music video Bad Habits by Ed Sheeran, who also has a smiley face tattoo on his body and uses it in other songs. But it's really incredible because that music video and the music song itself is, the song itself has been listened to billions of times all over the world. The
Right.
music video on YouTube alone is over 500,000 views, but there's a very predominant smiley face, and it also symbol he, I don't know if he knows or whoever did that video knows exactly what the ideas of the Order of Nine Angles are, and they're symbolized from the beginning to the end of the video, which begins at sundown and ends at sunrise, right? So it's almost night, and at night he's kind of Ed Sheeran plays kind of a night raiding vampire who he and his crew seem to feed on the kind of mundanes or muggles of the world in their own little kind of cult or group, which could symbolize something similar to what's happening with the smiley face killings. Was that these guys are out at night, they presence dark energy, just like the Order of Nine Angles does. They become a kind of a different character, a vampire, vampirism, and maybe commit crimes, and then they're the normal self in the morning. So It really is something else. And his connections, Ed Sheeran's connections, are really fascinating too, because he also does work with another group, a cult influence group called Bring Me the Horizon.
But in any event, Ruth Montgomery wrote a book about her entitled The Gift of Prophecy, in which she wrote about the very revealing and intriguing vision that Jean Dixon allegedly had. Quote, "The vision, which Jean considers the most significant and soul-stirring of her life, occurred on February the 5th, 1962. She saw the brightest sun she had ever seen." Isn't it funny how that sun always pops into this stuff? Now remember that reference to the sun, folks. "Stepping out of the brightness were a pharaoh and Queen Nefertiti." Remember here that these two individuals were Egyptians, and this will become significant later on. In fact, it's already significant if you've been listening to this show. The couple thrust forth a baby as if offering it to the entire world. Now, another interpretation, because they sprang from the sun, could be that this is Osiris and Isis and the child is Horus, and that is exactly the esoteric, real interpretation.
I've got a question here from Dom, who knew that I was going to be talking to you today. And he says, it seems that the Smiley isn't as recent, 1963, as it seems. So that's when it entered American popular culture, and it was used by the advertising industry to try and create a sort of feel-good positivity among Americans, we're told, just to try and make people feel good about the economy being on the upturn and, society just looking brighter. But Dom says it also seems to have been used by the ancients, going back to ancient cultures.
The wind blew some luck in my direction. I caught it in my hands today. I finally made a tricky French connection. You winked and gave me your okay. I'll take you on a trip beside the ocean and drop the top of Chesapeake Bay. Ain't nothing like the sky that knows a potion. The moon will send you on your way. Moonlight feels right. Moonlight feels right. We'll lay back and observe the constellations and watch the moon smiling bright. I play the radio on southern stations, 'cause southern bells are hell at night. You say you came to Baltimore from Ole Miss, a class of 7-4 gold ring. The eastern moon looks ready for a wet kiss to make the tide rise.
Therefore, the wedding of the sun and moon in alchemy is very important. Not because we're going to have a wedding up in the sky of the two luminaries, but because we're going to have a union of the principles for which they stand inside of the human body itself.
It's the number of the sun, Kabbalistically. And this came up in one of Bowley's numerous appearances in court. The prosecutor asked him, "No, you're not using the number 666. Is this not a number of evil?" Bowley says, "Oh, well, it just means the sun. If you want to, you can call me Sunny Boy."